Good evening for those joining us from Turkey and Gulf, and good afternoon for those in US or Europe. I'm Sinem Cengiz, a non-resident fellow with Gulf International Forum and a researcher with Gulf Studies Center at Qatar University. I'm pleased to moderate this timely and significant discussion on recent Gulf tour of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, comprising Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. The three-nation tour has captivated a great deal of attention because it was important both symbolically and strategically. It was Turkish president's first visit to the region after the recent elections in Turkey. The choice of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE is important here. Saudi Arabia and the UAE were the two Gulf states that Turkey had tense relations in the past decade, while Qatar is the closest country to Ankara within the GCC bloc. Turkey's bilateral relations with each individual GCC state has its own dynamics and should be evaluated within its own context. Ankara pursues a different approach towards each GCC state based on diverging agendas. Beside the visit's symbolic significance, the agreements that were signed carry serious potential to upgrade the relations into a new point. Especially the joint statement issued after the meeting in Saudi Arabia contained almost all subjects of cooperation, while in the UAE, the visit ended up with the signing of 13 agreements worth $51 billion. The two countries also decided to establish a joint high-level strategic council, as we all know that these mechanisms will allow them to have more structured relations in the long term. However, it's important to remind that most of the agreements signed during these visits were memorandums of understanding. Therefore, their implementation will depend on the determination of both sides. Although the rapprochement between Turkey and the Gulf states were based on economic targets, with political issues kept aside, we all know that sustained economic and security cooperation will certainly have political outcomes in the long term, especially in the region. What political results could this visit to three nations yield for Turkish Gulf relations? What Ankara actually expects from the Gulf states besides investments? Now that Turkey and the Gulf states have entered into a new stage in their relationship, so what could be the basis of this new partnership that Ankara aims to develop with each Gulf state? How could it go beyond the economic targets and include social, cultural, and even media dimensions? What are the motives for Gulf states to turn the page on their differences with Ankara after a decade? And why are Saudi Arabia and the UAE interested in investing in Turkey? Are the sectors they target lucrative? And would it bring in the long-term beneficial outcome for two sides? So lastly, what could be the issues that could complicate this improved relations? So in order to answer these questions, we have a perfect line of esteemed speakers. I want to welcome our speakers on the behalf of the Gulf International Forum and our audiences. We have Dr. Tarek Cherkaoui, we have Dr. Betul Dogan-Akkas, we have Dr. Murat Yesiltas, and Dr. Abdullah Baabood. We will first have our speakers and then a Q&A session. I will have a couple of questions to our speakers. And of course, if you have any question over the discussion, please let us know through the YouTube chat. So we will be able to go through your questions as well. I will now introduce our speakers in the order of their speaking. We will start with Dr. Tarek Cherkaoui. Dr. Cherkaoui is manager at TRT World Research Center. He holds a PhD in media and communication studies. His expertise includes international broadcasting, media discourse, information warfare, public diplomacy, and crisis communications. I guess Dr. Cherkaoui would be the right name to ask on how could Turkey and the Gulf states go beyond the conventional areas such as economics or security and include areas such as media, youth development, and culture. So second, we have Dr. Betul Dogan-Akkas. She's a researcher of the Arab Gulf states and holds a joint PhD in Gulf Studies from Durham University and Qatar University. In her research, Betul focuses on foreign policy, security strategies, and political culture in the GCC states. Dr. Betul also covers the involvement of the GCC states in the Yemen war. I guess she would be the right person to elaborate on Turkish-Qatari relations and their possible cooperation areas in the region. Third, we have Dr. Murat Yesiltas. Dr. Yesiltas is the director of the Foreign Policy Studies at SETA. He is also a professor in the Department of International Relations at Ankara Social Science University, where he gives courses on Turkey's international security and foreign policy analysis. As security will be one of the main topics of our discussion today, Dr. Yesiltas will be the right person to analyze Turkey's security policy in the Gulf region. Last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Abdullah Baabood. He's an academic from Oman who currently holds the chair of the State of Qatar for Islamic Area Studies and a visiting professor at the Faculty of International Research and Education at Waseda University in Japan. I believe we will be able to learn a great deal of knowledge from Dr. Baabood's perspective, from the Gulf perspective, especially on the relations with Turkey, as he is currently in Turkey. That's what we have learned. So it will be very interesting to hear firsthand information from the ground. So I thank all of our speakers once again. So without further ado, we will start with Dr. Cherkaoui. Dr. Cherkaoui, what are the motives for Saudi Arabia and Turkey to seek closer economic and defense collaboration? How could collaboration, especially on the defense field, change Turkey's role in the Gulf region? And how could this affect the balance of power in the region, most importantly? Do you think there's an external factor such as US, Russia, or Iran that motivated both sides to overcome their differences and start a different kind of manageable cooperation at the moment? So, Doctor, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sinem, for the introduction, and thank you for the invite. It is a real pleasure being here with such renowned panelists and experts on the Gulf. So let me start with your first question about what are some of the motives behind the rapprochement that is currently taking place between Turkey and Saudi Arabia. I believe my other colleagues will tackle other sides of the relation between Turkey and the Gulf. So I will just concentrate on the Saudi part of that relationship. So the motivation, I've seen many papers, many articles and op-eds on this issue. I think some of them were good, but a lot of them actually were very reductionist in the sense of just placing the relationship from a narrow point of view. I think we have to go back to, of course, I don't want to dwell too much on the history, on the previous eras of the relation between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, which had a lots of highs and lows throughout the past century. I will say that starting from 2002, there was a very big drive from the Turkish leadership to create good relations with the Arab region in general, the Middle East in general. I think this was successful to a large degree, and the golden age actually of the relations between Turkey and Saudi Arabia happened during this era. Unfortunately, the Arab Spring was this chapter that actually deteriorated the relations between the two sides, because there were so many dossiers in which Ankara and Riyadh were at odds. For example, Libya, for example, especially Egypt, and the removal of President Morsi and the new regime of Sisi caused a lot of tensions between the two parts. But the blockade of Qatar was actually the apogee of the tensions between the two sides, in which Ankara tried very hard at first to dialogue with Riyadh and try to de-escalate the situation between Riyadh and Doha, but unfortunately there was no success on this. So later on, Ankara was obliged to side with Qatar and actually move some of its defense personnel over there to reinforce the defense of Qatar. Later on, the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, unfortunately, was another lowest ebb in the relations between the two sides. So this is basically some of the background in the past 10 years. Unfortunately, let's say fortunately, there was this Al-Ula meeting in which the reconciliation between Saudi and Qatar took place in January 2021. And from that point onwards, we have seen this rapprochement between the two sides. So if we want to, in a nutshell, there are many facets for this relationship. One of it is about really the economy. I think Turkey is on a drive. It has always been, and there's nothing new, to reinforce its economy. I think it has always been looking into partners in the region, especially the Arab region. I think the Gulf offers a lot of the wealth that exists, the capital that can inject a lot of money into the economy. I think there's nothing really surprising. However, the relationship is not just about that, because for a long time, even at the best of the relation, there was only about $6 billion of interchange between the two nations, which is roughly less than 1% of the overall international trade of Turkey. So the volume is not that high, and it's not about it's not only the aim behind this relationship. Even now, with all the momentum that we have seen the Minister of Trade signaling that we probably would attain something like $7 billion in the short, $10 billion in the short term, and $30 billion in the long term, which are very good numbers, but they're still below the major trade partners of Turkey. So if we put that aside, then there is another dimension of the relation. I think the defense and the security cooperation between the two sides is very, very important. I think the Saudis, they like what they see in terms of efficiency, in terms of the weaponry that is battle tested. Turkey has offered weaponry that is adequate actually against militias, against very low asymmetric warfare that is plaguing the region. We have seen how the weaponry like the drone warfare operates in very effective way in Libya. We have seen in Syria. Actually, the Turkish armed forces depleted the YPG PKK forces in Syria and in Iraq. And if there were no other interferences from other powers such as Russia, I'm sure the problem of the YPG PKK would have been solved militarily. So the Saudis, they have seen this, they have seen the success of those weaponry systems, and they want the same, because after the war in Yemen, even though the Saudi Royal Air Force has one of the best equipment in the Middle East, still it wasn't efficient against asymmetric warfare, and therefore there are some really interest in acquiring some of this weaponry. And I think the first and major trade deals that happened between the two sides was on that aspect. So now to your questions, whether there are things that could really plague the relation. I think how closer this relation could be. I think the rapprochement is a positive first step, but there are things that are missing. We need more institutionalization into the relation, because right now everything is happening because of the personal relation between the president, the Turkish president, and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. But we need something like the systems that exist with Qatar in terms of high strategic Supreme Council that governs the relation. So that's one. What are the elephants in the room concerning this relation? I think the elephant in the room and the international factors that play into the rapprochement, I think the role of Iran is number one. I think Saudi Arabia has tested, unfortunately, the lethality of the militias and how they can be problematic for the economy. They can be problematic for the security. We all remember the attacks on the Abqaiq refinery back in 2019. This was a major thing. At that time, America did nothing, and even though the Saudis have a very prominent place in the strategic outlook of the United States, unfortunately, nothing was done, and therefore, I think there is an interest to from I think all sides, especially the Saudis and the UAE, to have a major regional force that is capable, that has the will, that has the capabilities to extrapolate the force and to move whenever, and to have these advanced forces that could fill the gaps in the theater. I think the maritime part of the securing also the oil is very important. We have seen a lot of piracy. We have seen how Iranian linked militias, they target the oil tankers. I think the Turkish Navy could be very handy in that regard. Of course, these are all now speculations. It depends on how the relationship would evolve. At that time, we can have more analysis on the subject.
Thank you, Dr. Cherkaoui, for highlighting some significant points. Actually, we need to delve further, I think, in the following minutes of the discussion. Historical background was important, and you have mentioned that the relationships should be more institutionalized. Actually, this is what I have been, and Betul knows that so well, I have been advocating for like a decade, because we have several significant platforms that the Turkish Gulf relations could be more institutionalized and could go beyond the personalized nature of the current relationship. High Strategic Council is definitely one of them. And then we have to also include, as I said, we have to go beyond some of the economic and security paradigms, and we have to include more of the social and cultural dimensions. And maybe we have to create more platforms for long-term relationships, sustained relationships. So elephants in the room, role of Iran, definitely. And you have touched upon Turkey's, of course, drone diplomacy, which we will be speaking further. And for now, we go ahead with Dr. Akkas, Dogan-Akkas. In regards to Ankara-Doha alliance, our question is, so how could the developing relations between Ankara and its former rivals, Saudi Arabia and UAE namely, might affect the course of strong Turkish-Qatari relations? But more of that, if you can give us from an intra-GCC relations perspective, how do you think the new dynamics could impact Turkey's role in the intra-GCC relations? The floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you, Sinem. It's so nice to be with you all, although it's only an online meeting. I am so happy to be with Dr. Murat, Dr. Abdullah, and Dr. Tarek. So the initial speech was excellent in respect with underlining the fact that the Turkey-Gulf relations are not institutionalized as they might be seen from the narrative of leaders. But the reality on the ground is more building up a process that might bring more outcomes. So first of all, we should define all these things on the ground now as a part of process. This is not just started, but just started to be part of their policy making, part of their orientation in the regional politics. So this is important, and I completely agree with the initial talk. I would like to have two brief starting points for your question. So when we talk about Turkish foreign policy with Doha or Turkish role in the Gulf, so we can't isolate what's happening in Turkey, what's happening in the Gulf capitals, and what's happening between Gulf capitals and Ankara from Turkish-Doha relations. So all these are a complex set of relations and network, which has business orientation, policy making when it comes to security relations, trust building, cultural, and some sort of soft power instruments, as you mentioned. So my first priority is to define what's happening on the ground now as a complex map of network. So this is why I think when we talk about Turkey, Doha, we can't isolate other Gulf capitals. So this is the first part. I think this is also what is somehow understood by the policymakers here in Ankara and also in the Gulf, because this is why we start seeing more complex visits and more complex relations that they are calling for a Gulf-Turkey cooperation in a way that intra-Gulf relations are also encouraged. So this is my second point, which I would like to underline, that in the current stage of relations, the purpose of Ankara seems like not to reach only bilateral sort of relations with those capitals, but also somehow establish GCC and Turkey network, bringing Turkey as another dynamic in the Gulf relations. So this might be called as an outsider of the regional politics, because obviously Turkey is not in the Gulf. But when it comes to establishing political and economic relations plus security relations, having it in a multilateral set of level of relations is really important, because at the moment, Gulf politics is in a process where they are resetting their threat perceptions. After the Al-Ula agreement in Saudi Arabia, we start seeing more orientations towards, once again, a reset of politics. This is why in the recent summit, in GCC summit, they had the agenda of having more intra-regional investments. This has been the title or the focus since maybe 2 decades. But in the recent political and economic atmosphere in the GCC, because of the requirement of diversification of economy, after oil economic portfolio, national visions, and the youth population and employment requirements of the GCC states encourage them to engage more economically with each other. So this is why the sort of Turkey is engaging with them is actually encouraging a multilateral relations. So this is why what I would like to underline in the current policy making of Ankara and Doha and Gulf capitals, the priority is investment and direct investment, and as much as complex it could be to have a trust building process. Is it realistic? This is the question. Can we really reach a level of economic cooperation between those states, prioritizing the pragmatic outcomes for the long term and the short term, of course? I am not sure if this is really perfectly fulfilled by the parties, but definitely there will be outcomes, because what we have seen in the global economic situation at the moment, most of the countries are reaching in a global policy making that encourage them to involve more with the multilateral parties, bringing more Eastern countries like China, India, or other rising economic powers. So this is why I see a realistic motivation behind the current economic cooperation, but I am not sure if this is going to reach a sustainable and transparent economic portfolio, because what we've seen with the GCC states, they are quite transparent when it comes to cooperating with the Western partners like Germany, Italy, France, but Britain as well, where they have excellent amount of investments or sovereign wealth funds. But when it comes to Turkey, there must be more transparency so we could understand the future of relations in a better way and visualize what's going to happen and how come it's going to bring more cooperation. And these questions are also bringing us to the fact that those states in the Gulf, they are all having agendas for national regions, because they have a demographic situation where they need more employment and more local production. And Turkey is a well-established partner in this, because Turkey is producing a lot of products that Gulf capitals can need them or could kind of share a know-how with the GCC capitals. And we see the example with Baykar when it comes to security industry, but also in other areas. So when it comes to articulating Turkish market or Turkish business circles, elites to the Gulf, Made in Gulf campaign, I think this could bring a sustainability in Doha, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Ankara relations. I believe the sustainability is kind of embedded in understanding the local aspects in the Gulf. The more they understand their local aspects more, the more there will be a sustainable relations. And this is also bringing us the idea of soft power, because in the current visit, what we've seen, President Erdogan gifted the leaders talk, which is the first electric car produced in Turkey by Turkish engineers here. And there were also other gifts given to President Erdogan. About the relations in 2 years before were at the high tension. So are we kind of in a process to like build a trust, a really like sustainable trust among the leaders, because before, like last year, we were mentioning only economic aspect of de-escalation. Now we start seeing more soft power instruments. So can we see more cooperation in the region when it comes to re-involvement of Syrian leadership to the regional politics, or the cooperation between Egypt, Turkey, and the Gulf partners? So can we see the end of this soft power instruments as a tangible outcome in the regional politics? I think this is an important question, and I'm kind of optimistic about that, because usually in the Arab culture, as you may all know, the gifts and those kind of gestures are somehow important to show the public and the global leaders that they are kind of enthusiastic to build more on that. So I think we will see more cooperation in terms of Syria, Libya, and we also seen the GCC leaders mentioned about potential role of Turkish policymakers in Sudan when it comes to conflict resolution. And my final focus is all these are kind of readjusting regional politics, because we know none of these countries completely changed their policy making. Turkey is still supporting Ikhwan, but not in the same way they were doing it before. And Mohammed bin Salman, Mohammed bin Zayed, they are all same leaders. Emir Tamim is the same person with the 2 years ago. What is the changing aspect in the relations? I think it is not about the leaders at the moment, but the pragmatism and practical outcomes, and the regional politics changed all these elements. They are kind of affecting their domestic politics, external politics, and their global pursuit of power. So this is why I see a readjustment of regional politics around their domestic and external policy making. Thank you.
Thank you, Betul, for leaving a lot of questions behind. Your doubts and your questions definitely is going to should be highlighted. First of all, Dr. Akkas has mentioned the importance of multilateral level of relations. After Dr. Cherkaoui's mention of the institutionalization, this is actually a good follow-up, multilateral level of relations. And Turkey is encouraging multilateral relations within the GCC, intra-GCC relations. However, Dr. Akkas mentions that it's at the moment, maybe realistic motivations are behind. However, in the long term, will it be sustainable? This will be the question, and it depends. The sustainability depends on understanding the local context. This is very important, especially for the Turkish policymakers or Turkish academics or media personalities to understand the local context within each GCC state. And transparency is important from the Gulf side towards Turkey in building sustainable relationships on different fields. And I definitely agree with Dr. Akkas. The leadership's beliefs and visions hasn't seen any change. And it's only now the priorities have shifted. And these priorities will be shaping the following years that we will be seeing. So thanks again, Dr. Akkas. And we will now go ahead with Dr. Yesiltas. As our previous speakers have slightly touched upon the Syria, Dr. Yesiltas, Syria is a very delicate issue for Turkey, and the Gulf states do have, all individual Gulf states with different roles that they have played in the Syrian conflict, do also have a stake in the Syria theater. So what kind of cooperation can Turkey and the GCC states do in Syria, and which GCC state can you mention in specific? Do you see now a better harmony between Turkey and the GCC states' role in Syria, or if not now, in the future, what's your perspective, especially on the Syria file? Thank you, Doctor. The floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me. First of all, before I come to your question, I would like to also make a couple of points concerning Turkey's Gulf rapprochement or normalization, and the main driving factors behind this normalization between Turkey and other Gulf countries, especially normalization between Turkey and Saudi Arabia and between Turkey and United Arab Emirates. And we know, as Betul mentioned, there has been good relations and strategically important relations between Turkey and Qatar. But now the relationship from a strategic perspective, I think is transforming a new era, not only in terms of Turkey's engagement to the region, but also the desire of Gulf countries to make collaboration with Turkey. First of all, I think number one is about the geopolitical and strategic dynamics. This is, I believe, really important. At least Turkey perceives the international dynamics behind the normalization process in the Middle East is really important. There are three topics that we have to look at. First of all, of course, United States withdrawal from Afghanistan is number one in terms of understanding United States' new commitment in the international politics. Secondly, Russian invasion of Ukraine. It was a strategic shock for the European countries and international society, but it brought a new geopolitical dynamics in which Turkey has been also playing an important role in terms of the geopolitical interactions between the Western countries, NATO, and Russia. The third dynamic as part of a global geopolitical and strategic dynamic is about the global geopolitical competition between United States and China. These are really important in terms of transforming regional countries, especially Turkey's policies vis-a-vis the countries in the region. This is the macro level dynamics. There are, of course, consequences of these structural and conjectural dynamics in the international political level. Number one is about the increasing United States ambiguity, which ultimately shaped the very nature of Gulf countries' approach towards Turkey, and of course, Turkey's approach to the Gulf countries, especially Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. This strategic ambiguity produced somehow ambiguity for other countries in the regions in terms of United States commitment. Number two, of course, is about Russian concentration on Ukraine, which ultimately undermine Russian strategy in the region, including Syria, which is one of the important file for Turkey, and it is also important, policy process between Turkey and other regional countries. Another point in this context is about Chinese, so to speak, naive policy towards the region. We saw this naive policy in the context of Chinese facilitator role or mediation role between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and Chinese naive approach to the Palestinian issue. These are the the policy implications of the global international political development in terms of driving the normalization or rapprochement between Turkey and Gulf countries. I think when it comes to the regional dynamic, this is number two. Syria is one of the important one, of course. There are three different normalization process across the region. Number one is about the normalization process between Israel and Arab countries as part of the Abraham Accord, which is under which has been taking place since 2020, and the other one, the normalization process between Syria and Arab countries, which ultimately shape also Turkey's perspective towards Syria. Of course, now Turkey has a different normalization process, which is not directly related to the Turkey's relations with the Gulf countries, because it is a process between Turkey, Russia, Iran, and Assad regime. There are a number of issues in terms of Turkey's priority in Syria. Fighting against terrorism is number one, and Turkey is trying to overcome the terrorism problem, which is emanated by PKK, PYD, and YPG, is becoming a strategically important threat for Turkey. So therefore, solving the terrorism issue in Syria by collaborating the Syrian regime is one of the important priority for Turkey, but it is not an easy task for Turkey. And I think I have also doubts about the Syrian regime capacity and motivation to solve Turkey's security problem, especially concerning the PKK problem. When it comes to the Turkey Gulf relations, of course, Turkey and Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar were on the same page in terms of supporting the Syrian opposition, but later on they changed their policy because of many different reasons. But now, they have also the normalization process with the Assad regime. The problem is about there is a gap between the situation on the ground and the desired political solution. Without solving the problems on the ground, it is not possible to produce positive results for Turkey and other Gulf countries. But it seems that especially after the normalization steps taken by Gulf countries with Assad regime, probably they will support the normalization process between Turkey and Syrian regime. But terrorism, of course, is not the only problem. Especially the second priority for Turkey is return of refugee. There are again, the gap between the situation on the ground and the desired solution with regards to the refugee problem, solving the refugee problem. So therefore, especially when we look at the Turkey-Qatari relations in terms of the providing, safe environment for refugee in especially northern Syria, where the Turkey has the control, probably it will help a lot to facilitate Turkey's policy and deliver Turkey's, objectives in terms of the refugee return. There is also another textbook example to see how Turkey-Gulf relations can work over the solution, especially with regards to the rapprochement between political actors, opposition actors, and Syrian regime. We know that still Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, including Qatar, have deep relations with the opposition groups. But we have also another problem in Idlib, in which it will produce difficulties for the refugee mobilization when we take into consideration recent airstrike of Russia against the civilian places and the IDP camps. It is really important to see how Russia is trying to back to Syrian stage. And I think in this file, Turkey-Gulf rapprochement will help a lot in terms of solving the refugee problem. The final point is about still Turkey is supporting United Nations Security Council resolution in terms of the reaching a political solution in Syria. Security Council resolution number 2254. It is still supported by Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. It is also important to see the close cooperation between Turkey and these three countries in terms of supporting the Geneva process, constitutional process. So therefore, as a consequence, I believe that these rapprochement or the re-energizing the relationship between Turkey and three Gulf countries will also contribute and decrease the security issues and probably produce the stability in the region.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yesiltas, for highlighting especially the points regarding the three different normalization steps in the region: the Israel and the GCC, the Syria and the Arab countries, and the Gulf normalization with Turkey. And you have mentioned three very important points and areas that actually Turkey can cooperate with the GCC states when it comes to Syria file. First is the refugee issue, which Qatar, we know that a few months ago there were news that Qatar is going to cooperate with Turkey in kind of funding in the northwestern Syria. There will be houses built in terms of construction. And definitely the second point is the role and the influence of the different GCC states within the opposition. We know that the opposition is fragmented, but GCC was also fragmented at that time when the opposition was actually so-called supported by the GCC states. So still this point, I believe, should be not neglected and it should be highlighted. And the third point is the platforms, international platforms that Turkey and the GCC states can cooperate when it comes to Syria file. First of all, their positive support towards Geneva process, although Turkey is still going and pursuing the Astana process with different actors, Russia and Iran, but it had not actually closed its dialogue channels. We know that even when there were tense relations between Turkey and the GCC states, there was some dialogue channels open between the Turkey and the Gulf state when it comes to Syria, because it's a very delicate topic which concerns when it comes to extremism, when it comes to terrorism. Gulf states mentioned, even in the joint statement between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, there was a mention towards terrorism and extremism, fundamentalism. This kind of problems are one of the things that Turkey and GCC states share. So thank you so much for highlighting Syria was an important topic. So we can pass from this, and we can go ahead with Dr. Baabood. We would like to have your Gulf perspective, Doctor. Could you please let us know about the driving forces that might have pushed Riyadh and Abu Dhabi to end their rivalry with Ankara? And do you really think this rivalry has ended up, or just it turned into a manageable version? So the second question within this context would be, how will a GCC-friendly Turkey affect the Saudi-Emirati power struggle? So the floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Sinem, and also it's a great honor and a pleasure to be here with this distinguished group to talk about Turkish GCC relations. Being the last speaker, as it were, in a panel, it's always a pleasure, because all you have to do is recycle some of the ideas that have been mentioned. But I hope that I will also do more than that. To answer your question, I think what we are seeing now in the Gulf states is a new thinking and a new mode of operation. Whether this is sustainable or not is another question, but obviously this is what we are witnessing. We are witnessing a normalization that is going on, not just with Turkey, but also, as other colleagues have mentioned, with other regional powers. We are seeing that conflicts and wars and other problems are being resolved. And we are seeing more refocus on building the sustainable economies for the Gulf states. And I think this is something quite fundamental, and I believe that it will stay, because the challenges that the Gulf states are going to face in the future with the global energy dynamics and the transition in energy is going to push these oil-producing states to have a much more sustainable economy. And to do so, you need to have good relationship with your neighbors. You have to trade with them. You have to co-invest. You have to be able to get technology and know-how, etc. And obviously opening up and enlarging the markets, as it were. And I think this is what drives the Gulf states to do so. MBS, the Crown Prince, Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, has said that he wants to see the Gulf states as a new, or the Middle East as a new Europe. And I guess he means what he says. And there is potential to see that, because of the changing geo-economic situation, where the center of economic activities is pivoting or is moving more towards the east, and where we're seeing a rise of Asia and Asian countries, but also this is a time where Middle Eastern countries can have their say and can play their role in developing their own economy. And they can only do that if there is peace and prosperity and stability, where the investment, not only regional investment but international investment, can come in to the region. So that's one reason why this is happening. The other reason is, of course, it's been alluded to earlier, and I just very quickly mention it, and that is the global change, the geopolitical change, where the US is no longer as perceived as the power that is going to guarantee the security of the region. And of course, there were a number of examples where this has happened. And obviously, this has impacted the thinking of the leaders in the region to start to work together, first of all, and to work with other regional countries to ensure their own security and the security of the whole region. And this, again, requires a new thinking. As you know, the United States has restricted selling certain arms and certain military and defense technology to the Gulf states, particularly to Saudi Arabia, because of the war in Yemen. And here, Turkey obviously provides a very, very important source for defense technology, especially the unmanned aerial vehicles, which is the drones, which have proved to be very, very or extremely successful in the recent crisis of course, in Syria, but also now in Russia-Ukraine war. So the Gulf states are now trying to move from relying on Western, as it were, Western military arms to diversify their sources, but also to encourage and to promote indigenous production of military equipment and defense equipment. And this is, I think, Turkey can play a very important role there. We also have to remember, it's not just unmanned aerial vehicles or drones, but also there are a lot of other military equipment that Turkey can help the Gulf states to develop their own indigenous technology. But if you just go back again to the geopolitics, regional geopolitics, Turkey's location, with, of course, Eastern Mediterranean, but also to Europe, Black Sea, Turkey's relationship with West Asia, as it were, and also with Europe, can play a very important role where trade and investment can be seen going both ways, especially if we're looking at where Europe now needs a lot of gas, and it'll be cheaper to send it through pipeline through Turkey, and there is a lot of talk about that. There is a train that is, I believe, from Iraq now moving to Turkey, connecting with the other Gulf states. So this is going to help, not only passengers and people's movement, but also goods and services, etc. So there are compelling reasons why the Gulf states want to have this relationship with Turkey. And I will just end, if I may, Sinem, with the saying that, the recent crisis because of the war in Ukraine has created a windfall of profits for the oil-producing countries, especially, given the oil crisis. And therefore, the Gulf sovereign wealth funds and Gulf governments are flushed with cash. And given the Turkish economy and the value of the lira, this is a very good time to start thinking of investing in not only in infrastructure and also in industries, but also in budding industries and new technology in Turkey. So I think there are some really good reasons for this relationship to flourish. And I think, the old mode has changed. I just want to say something that, you mentioned competition between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. I think this is normal. It happens in many in many regional and between neighboring countries and within many regional organizations as well, because they are members of the GCC. And I think we've seen it that it's being controlled, but I think each country has every right to compete in many ways, as long as that is within the rules of the game, as it were.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baabood. And it was a very realistic, comprehensive understanding from the Gulf on what were the driving forces for the Gulf states to approach to Turkey at this current moment. You had mentioned their need to diversify and their need to have their own indigenous production. And at the time, in the last 5-6 years, especially, it's not something new, but it comes to agenda at the moment. But Turkey's increasing military production in terms of its own local production is taking attention from the Gulf, but it has especially found its right time maybe now. And the second thing, of course, Turkey's geopolitical location, its relations with the EU and Asia, kind of having a bridge role, especially. Maybe it's important to touch upon the Istanbul process. As you remember, Turkey played a key role in kind of enhancing GCC-EU relationship at the time. I think, if I'm not wrong, maybe Dr. Yesiltas and Dr. Betul can also verify 2005 or 2004 it was. And now we see the GCC countries are hosting NATO and EU representations, and this is also something new for the last one decade, not even more than 5 to 6 years, that the first NATO regional offices in Kuwait now, and then in Qatar and UAE and Saudi Arabia we have EU offices. We know that Turkey had played an important role in the first early 2000s in regards to this. So we will actually, I will be curious to see how Turkey can play further in this regards, and of course the oil prices that you have touched upon, the economic aspect. Now we will go to our second round of questions that we receive from our center and our audiences. So we will be starting with Dr. Cherkaoui again. The first question will be, you mentioned about the institutionalization of the relationship, but can we a little bit go further about what sectors you mean, like defense or economic, that could be ideal to start at the moment? And secondly, which Gulf state do you think has gained mostly or is to gain mostly economically from warming of relations with Turkey? And third question would be, since you are coming from the media sector, so it will be like the first will be the institutionalization question, the second will be the which GCC state had gained more, and the third is media's role. You know that the media was one of the areas that was affected by the tension between Turkey and the GCC, and it was really a very bad remark in the history about this. So what role can media play between Turkey and the GCC, or what can Turkey and GCC countries do in regards of the media sector in order to overcome the potential, or because we need to speak about the future now rather than now. Yes. So potential problems that media can play in regards to overcome it. Floor is yours.
Thank you. And these are very, very pertinent questions. I think when we mention the institutionalization of the relations, I think we talk about an umbrella structure, which is highly placed at the level of the heads of the governments, and which encompasses many activities, including economic, including security, including military, including other political endeavors. So institutionalization needs to start from there and cascade down. The advantages of institutionalization is to have, instead of having a relation, which is good to have in the initial phases between the leaders as a personal relation, in which they engage with each other and know each other better, and sometimes the message is very quick, and you have behind every leader there is a huge bureaucratic apparatus, which unless is also like other people within that apparatus are part of this dialogue and understand and have their own input in the phrasing and the formulation of those policies, and how these policies can cascade down to other ministries and agencies, then the whole relation become just as part of a bubble between two main leaders. I think it's essentially in the beginning, but unless you go to the second phase and the third phase, where everything cascades down to reach the level of the implementation from the ministries, then nothing will really happen on the long run. I think the country that manages this very well with Turkey has been Qatar. I think there have been 8 high-level meetings for the strategic high committee between the two sides, and the meetings are regular. They take place every year. I think it has been going on since 2014. This is something that can be replicated. I see that the UAE also is now having the same intention, and there is now the establishment of a high-level committee between the two sides. So this is what I mean by institutionalization. I also think that there needs to be more clear agendas, because right now it's like a supermarket. They like somebody going to a supermarket. Oh, I need this, I need that. But the reality is, when you go to a supermarket, you don't have a relation with the supermarket. You're just like a customer. You come and go, and there are other customers. So we have to, if we want really to institutionalize the relation between the two sides, we need to move from the supermarket idea to a dialogue that has a proper agenda. What do you want as a KSA, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? Do you have like this high-level future conception of NEOM, for example? Okay, what do you need? Right now, we see, for example, a lot of foreign companies, a lot of especially Western companies coming, but from what I gather, and I might be wrong, and I stand to be corrected, a lot of them are not delivering. There is just like a lot of money being, kicked into consultancies and all that. But the implementation phase, as far as I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is very slow. But if, for example, the Turkish part is taking place and participating to this project, we all know the value that Turkish companies are bringing. They are everywhere. They're massive doers on the ground. They have a good track records in Africa and elsewhere in Asia. So that could change. So, for example, this is an agenda, another agenda on security. Okay, what do KSA need in terms of agenda? What can the Turkish part contribute to that? So, more clear agenda. So that's for question number 1. So, question number 2, please remind me of that again.
Which Gulf country has gained more economically? But you have already mentioned that the Qatar has been one of the countries which has institutionally. Yes. So we can just go to the third question briefly about the media's role, because you are the right person. I think we found you at the moment, so it's important to ask.
Thank you. I think it's true. Qatar, for the second question, has already moved to like this institutionalization, but I think the door is still open for other contenders. I think Saudi. I think the Emirates is coming very strongly with a lot of interest and a lot of resolve, and also a lot of proposals. I think they might also constitute like serious players on the relation between the Gulf and Turkey. For the final part, which is about the media role, I totally agree. The media role during the crisis was very problematic from both sides. I think the Saudi media was very unprofessional in many ways. Also, parts of the Turkish media didn't fare well during the crisis. But what we can do moving forward is, for example, the idea of a global media forum that can be organized between the two sides. I attended recently a global media forum in different places, like especially in Azerbaijan, where there is a need for dialogue and there is a need for exchange between different media organizations, and I think it plays a big role, because once you start knowing your counterparts in different media organizations, there is more dialogue. There are more relations that are building. It's no longer like people behind their screens and just abstract wordings and phrases that you don't know even how they're gonna be received from the other end. But when you have the human dimension, the human touch, and when people can do it regularly, like on a yearly basis, exchange like best practices and talk about certain issues that plague the relation, I think there will be some traction and some movement ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cherkaoui. We will speed up a little bit now. Dr. Dogan-Akkas, we would like to a little bit delve into the Yemen file. This is your area of expertise. Could you please remind us about Turkey's position in Yemen, and what role can Ankara play in the Yemen profile in the future with the GCC? Do you see a Turkish Gulf cooperation on this topic? And secondly, from Yemen to Horn of Africa, do you think the normalization at the moment will have any impact on the ongoing interest conflict between Turkey and the GCC over there? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sinem, for these very difficult two questions. So the first one, unfortunately, we haven't seen any cooperation among Turkey and Gulf partners on the ground in Yemen. But Turkish partners and non-governmental organizations are in Yemen working for the people, for the society. So this is why the humanitarian aid aspect of Turkish foreign policy is there. And this is well encouraged and supported by the GCC countries. There haven't been any kind of discourse or negative interpretation of Turkish non-governmental organizations in Yemen on the ground from Saudi side or Emirati side. But Turkey actually is one of the countries in the world that has really important historical ties with Yemeni society. The leaders back in the history, more than 6th century, they governed Yemen. So this is why actually any sort of Turkish interpretation for peace to keep war ended could be actually supportive. But and I know from the policymakers, they actually kind of try to be part of it. But as you know, the Emirati and Saudi policymaking is already stuck in Yemen, and I don't know if this could give Turkey a space to play a policy making in Yemen. But I believe at least politically supporting the local communities with foreign aid is part of the policy making. But to be honest, I am not sure if any other external power will be allowed to be in Yemen, because even Qatari and Kuwaiti mediation or even Omani mediation weren't really supported because the tension between Emirat and Saudi Arabia. For Horn of Africa, I am more optimistic when it comes to Turkish role, because Turkey has also well supported foreign policy making in there, and there has been conflict with Emirati policy making especially in Somaliland and Somalia, and with Egypt and Saudi Arabia, there has been issues over Sudan and use of Sudanese ports. So I guess this de-escalation might bring more cooperation in Horn of Africa. But what about the Iranian involvement then? Because Turkey is not only in conflict with the Gulf partners, and I think this could be the easy chapter to solve, but I think there's more with Chinese and Iranian role in Horn of Africa. So Turkey could be a mediator between Iran and the Gulf countries when it comes to easing the situation in Horn of Africa. But I am not sure if this could be a priority at the moment for the foreign policy making. Maybe after a couple of years when Libya and Syria solved or Egypt is eased in the foreign policy making, Turkey could focus more on this. And I believe there could be more for Turkish role in Horn of Africa. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akkas. Dr. Murat, Yesiltas, the question will be, Dr. Baabood have a little bit touched upon, but from the Turkish perspective, how would you evaluate the defense relationship and the arms sales are becoming a solid factor in the improvement of Turkish Gulf relations? That's what we see at the moment. So our question comes from the also audience at the center, that would the Turkish arms sales among the GCC states compete with those of the European countries in the future? Mm-hmm. The first angle is this, the European, and within the own GCC context, intra-GCC context, Turkey's this role, how would be it perceived within their own competition? The floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you. I think this is a great question, and it is really important for the potential of the Turkey Gulf relations. Yes, when it comes to the Turkish defense industry, there has been transformation, for 2 decades, and Turkey now is becoming a global actor in defense market. When we look at the numbers and statistics which were released by international institutions, Turkey is transforming its place in terms of its arms sales. So there are advantages of Turkey when it comes to its relations with the Gulf countries. Number one is about the Gulf countries, procurement, military equipment from the Western countries. There has been always discussion between Gulf countries and the Western capitals, especially when it comes to the Saudi Arabia, United States relations and other Western countries, which have been providing a military platform to the Gulf countries. There has been always debates in terms of the conditionality. When it comes to the Turkey, yes, of course, Turkey is also improving its policies concerning arms sales. But when it comes to the strategic relationship between Turkey and Qatar, there is no kind of political conditions or other conditions. There is no normative, at least at this stage, there is no normative aspect of this arms sale for Turkey. Turkey at this stage wants to play a more active role in defense market by increasing its defense arms sales to the different countries. Another important point is about Turkish defense industry products, especially drone. Turkey is a really drone power. It is combat proven. We saw this in Syrian war, in Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, in Ukraine, in Libya. So therefore, many countries now are really eager to procure Turkish drone because it's successful operational activities and records in different conflict domains, including state to non-state actors, including state-to-state conflict. Another important point is that I think we have to look at what do Gulf countries need in terms of gaining their strategic autonomy when it comes to the defense industry and military power. So Turkey is a good candidate in this context in terms of its investment into the strategically important military platform. So Saudi Arabia needs good and smart air missile defense system in which Turkey is producing its own and will probably reach the high quality defense missile system when it is compared with the other countries, especially in the Western countries. The good news about Turkey's defense industry is the increasing cooperation between Turkey and European countries in terms of making strategic cooperation in air defense missile system. And of course, when it comes to the Turkey's national project, especially in terms of air power, sea power, Turkey, I think will reach at the strategic level in terms of having a capacity to produce this kind of strategic platform in which Gulf countries will need to consolidate their military power under the circumstances of ambiguity of United States and other European countries to deliver this strategic platform to the Saudi Arabia, to United Arab Emirates because of, for example, Saudi Arabia's ongoing war in Yemen or United Arab Emirates' extraterritorial military operational capacity. So therefore, Turkey is a good candidate to make a cooperation, and it will also help to consolidate the strategic relationship between Turkey and Gulf countries in this defense industry.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yesiltas, for going in deep about the defense sector. Now we will go ahead with Dr. Baabood. So one of the most tricky questions has been left for you, actually. I already mentioned that in the introduction remarks. So what are the possible spoilers for the current improvement of relations that could put the Turkish-Saudi or Turkish-Emirati relations at a stress test and lead to another confrontation? The floor is yours, Doctor. Doctor, you're muted, yeah.
Are you sure you want me to answer this, Sinem? But
I
anyway,
think right question, the right person, Doctor. Go ahead.
Okay, let me, if you allow me, I just want to just add something to what my colleagues Tarek, Murat, and Betul have just mentioned, and that was the idea of the institutional relations, which I totally agree with. And I think, you know, there's for any relationship to be sustainable, it has to be much deeper than just, you know, being built on a personal relationship. But I want to go beyond that to say that what is lacking in the Middle East is an overarching forum mechanism for cooperation between all the member states. So it's not just it's not just institutional relation between Turkey and member countries in the GCC, but how...
Doctor, just to interrupt, because you spoke about the forum, just to, you know, there was Turkish Arab Forum, which was interrupted when the tensions have started. So I don't know if it was revitalized later on or not, but it was very important. It was going to be held in Turkey, but then because of the disagreements regarding Egypt, it was like it was going to be the fifth meeting, and it was very important for Arab-Turkish cooperation. So do you have any, you know, comments about that? It could be one of the very important areas that Turkey and GCC countries can revise it. Yeah.
Of course, and that's important. But I was also thinking, even beyond that, to have a much more inclusive regional forum. And not just Turkey and the Arab world, or Turkey in the GCC, but, you know, you can include other countries that are related or within the same region, which even Iran, for example. What is this region missing is some kind of a forum where they can have dialogue, where they can have collaboration, where they can have institutional relations. This is largely missing. We've seen that in Europe. You know, it's happened in Europe. We've seen it happen in South America. We've seen it happen in Asia. But the Middle East, or however wants to define the Middle East, is still lacking some kind of overarching forum that brings all these countries together to conduct their relationship, to, you know, conflict resolution, etc., cooperation. And the challenges they're facing are huge. And the challenges are now beyond borders. So it's not just, you know, facing one country or this particular sub-region, but the whole region. So I think this is something that the whole region should look at. But if you want me to answer that difficult question, I think the spoilers for this is if we go back to this personalized relationship and of course the personalized decision making. Obviously, the region, as we know, is plagued by that because of the, you know, the political systems that we have, and therefore a change of leadership here or there, change of perception as well, could of course affect this relationship. So I think this is very, very important. This is why this institutional relationship that I alluded to, and of course the colleagues have already mentioned, is very important, and not only, as I said, bilateral, but also at the regional overarching, like, regional level. Other spoilers is, of course, there are other powers that would like to, regional powers that would like to have, you know, to work as a spoilers, for example, because of competition as well. And this is why, if you bring them into this regional mechanism or regional forum, it becomes much more easier, and they can see that they are not being excluded. So I think this is very important, that we should ensure that this regional forum, regional mechanism, regional organization, however wants to call it, is not exclusive, but inclusive of all the players in the region. Of course, we cannot also neglect international powers. I don't think, you know, there are obviously some international powers that will be envious of what is going on. Turkey is chipping away at some other powerful countries' interest in this region, in this context, especially, in the Gulf states, especially when we talk about military equipment. And obviously, some countries, global powers would try and work as spoilers. And I think we should not neglect the media as well. The media can play a very important role. And obviously, I'm talking here where we have a specialist in the media, but I'm sure he can add more to that. But I think, we need, the media is, of course, very important. Social media as well, very important in pushing this relationship. And I think we have to ensure that this relationship, as I said, it's not only institutional, but also it is people-to-people contact that we need to also work on. And I think that is happening. I think there is a lot of relationship is being built now. It's not new, as we know. And we've seen that a lot of business people, a lot of business interests are becoming much more enmeshed and entrenched. So it's going to be difficult for any spoiler or any attempt to spoil the relationship to break this relationship. Obviously, there will always be spoilers. Obviously, there will always be people and countries or other organizations, etc., that are envious of this relationship. But the more that this relationship is built deeper and wider and institutionalized and so on, that is going to help to cement this relationship and make sure that it is going to work. I think, as I said earlier in the discussion, that I think because of the changing geopolitics and the dynamics of that, this relationship is going to continue for a long time because the fundamentals are pushing for it.
Doctor, sorry.
Both regions, both Turkey and the Middle East Arab world need each other. So it's interdependency here at its best. Thank you.
Dr. Baabood, thank you so much. It was really perfect, as with our other speakers. Well, I think we should end up slowly because our time is up. However, it was very important to touch about the people-to-people relationship, because when there's tensions between the countries, as Dr. Yesiltas will know it as well, Dr. Betul and Dr. Baabood will know it, there's track 2 diplomacy. But who are the main figures behind this track 2 diplomacy? It's academics, it is media personalities, it's the business people, it's the NGOs. What we are lacking between Turkey and GCC is a comprehensive understanding. If we depend on deep defense and only business targets, and we neglect the main driving forces behind, such as now we have a growing youth in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, and in Turkey as well. And these are going to be the future voices in this region. So if we focus on the youth encouragement and cooperation, academic cooperations to understand the local context, because I don't think from Turkey we do understand each and every GCC state individually in depth, and even from the GCC context, as coming from the Gulf region, me, myself, and most of our speakers do also, we need to also look at the Turkey from different perspectives rather than only the leadership or the current personalities. Turkey is, of course, having diversified segments, and this is very important to understand. We have several questions coming from our audiences. I need to apologize, especially they want to learn about Turkey GCC cooperation on climate change. I know this is a very hot topic because now UAE is going to host in November, as you all may know. Last year it was Egypt. So this is a very hot topic on agenda, and Turkey is actually having some kind of sort of cooperation with GCC state, and artificial intelligence maybe Dr. Yesiltas would be the perfect name to do that, but we have really no time for that. I think as Gulf International Forum, we should have the second round of this discussion, Turkish GCC relations, and we could talk on more non-conventional topics such as climate change, artificial intelligence, cultures, media, and social issues and academic cooperation. So we could really build some kind of future comments for the future rather than speaking about today. So I want to thank all of you, each one of you individually. We are grateful for you all joining us on this very timely discussion. It was very valuable, each one of your talks. And also I want to thank for everyone who has joined us tonight. So do you have the last remarks if you would like to add, or we would be ending in a minute?
Thank you. Thank you for your moderation.
Thank you, Sinem.
Thank you so much. It was really informative.
And from me, thank you, Sinem, and also thank the Gulf International Forum, and also thank all my colleagues here in this panel. I've learned so much from them. Thank you so much. And from your questions.
Thank you. See you all soon in person, inshallah. Good evening. İyi akşamlar and مساء الخير.
مساء الخير.
Okay.